Okay, so hello and welcome to the seventh writing workshop. Today we'll be talking about dialogue. And so you've probably run into dialogue before. It's essentially just what a character is saying to another character. Can anybody give me an example of dialogue? Real big challenge one here.
Hello. Oh well. I got an answer. That said, we just had dialogue.
Great, yeah, so we've had some conversation, we've just had some chatter, and that is essentially dialogue. Cool. So here's an example. It's a charming day today, he said. Charming as my uncle's left foot, she responded. That's also dialogue. It's the exchange of words between two characters. It's not too complicated. So in a lot of ways, dialogue in games acts much like it does in any other form of writing. You may have to indicate the speaker, whether that be through visuals or a name tag of sorts, right? The character might be delivering the line in a way that affects the meaning. Like traditional dialogue, when a character says, can come off as stiff or cheesy, or overly dramatic as well. So, you know, don't go making things too cheesy sounding, which is fun at times. In some cases, you might even have a voiceover for your dialogue, depending on the game project, which is something to consider in terms of formatting and how you want to go about it. So yeah, let's talk about some uses of dialogue. So traditionally speaking, dialogue can be used as a tool for developing your character, the world, or the plot or conflict. This is pretty common in like traditional writing as well, right? We can learn a lot about a character based on how they talk, what they talk about, how they interact with the character. It's like, oh, hello friend, or oh, it's you. So these are some tools that we can use to better fill out our world and our characters. In game dev, we often don't have a lot of space to define our story, so this is a good way to use that, to take advantage of this space. Let's see. In games specifically though, dialogue has another purpose, and that is to help guide the player. Think of, say, a quest giver. They point you in the direction of where you need to go next in the game. Another thing that you can do is have the characters themselves sort of guide the player. It's like, I really need to go do this thing, or what's next? I still need to go do this thing. Or like talking to each other like, hey, let's go over there, type of thing. And that in itself does sound a little bit bland, a little bit boring. Just go do this thing, right? Like, go fight the boss, she says. Great, we know we have to go fight the boss, but that's not very interesting, is it? We don't know much about that boss. There's no sense of danger, really. All we know is that there's going to be a fight. So more effective dialogue tries to marry the two purposes of story and world building and guiding that player. You want to try to get a good mix. Not using both of them is really just wasting perfect good space for writing and design. So let's say instead, we have them say, see to it that vile tyrant Fleck breathes his last. Yeah, that's a little bit cheesy, maybe a bit dramatic. It's not perfect, but it's a step in the right direction. We have a character who's introduced by name, Fleck, this terrible tyrant, who is presumably the guy we're going to be offing. The speaker seems to have something against the bad guy, so maybe she comes off as more authoritative or badass, or really hates this fellow. Or maybe she just sounds overly dramatic and this is just a bad line. Who knows? But this is kind of more interesting, hopefully. Now, you don't want to go too far, though, because as we sort of obscure and make it sound all fancy and frilly, we can lose that simple, blunt line of, hey, you do need to go to this thing, though. So you have to sort of balance it sounding nice and it being clear what you're trying to get the player to do. So, 2 years ago, we had game writer Gavin Jurgens-Fury give a talk about games writing at GDW, an event that this club hosts every year, right? And he was talking about like the basics of games writing. And one thing that he brought up in dialogue was this concept of the USI triangle of dialogue, which is, as you can see, useful, short, and interesting. So you want your dialogue to try to be a good balance between these three components. Something that is useful would be go fight the boss, and that leans on the short side as well, but it's not very interesting. Maybe my other example of make him breathe his last is more interesting. It's not as short though. And it is still a bit useful, but maybe it's a little bit less clear what we have to do, right? So we want to try to make our dialogue such that it balances these three aspects to the best of our ability. So why should our dialogue be short? That's a new one, right? Well, in some cases we might be dealing with technical constraints. This could be physical space, such as in card games. If we're working with cards, we have a very small amount of space to work with. We can't have paragraphs of text describing what the card does. We need to be succinct, direct. What does this card do? What is the effect of its attack? How does it work, right? Some other technical constraints could be maybe your programmer has a text box that only takes like 25 words or characters. Or maybe like if we go above that, it looks weird on the screen. So these are things that we need to be mindful of and try to work around. So we want to try to make our dialogue shorter. Another thing, if you're writing tons and tons of words, players might simply lose interest. And if we want our dialogue to be useful, if we want to have key details hidden in the dialogue, we need to make sure that the player's paying attention. So it benefits us to keep it short. And lastly, it's just good practice. If we can get across what we want to get across in fewer words, then that means that we're being very deliberate and smart with our word choice, and that's what we want to do. We want to communicate well what we're trying to get across in our dialogue. So that's why you'd want to keep it short and sweet. Okay, so now we're going to talk about some tools for dialogue in our games. So generally speaking, it's going to vary project by project. Sometimes you might have a programmer who makes their own text system or dialogue system, right? And they'll try to make it easy enough for you to use, but it might require a little bit of learning on your part each time. For just getting the dialogue out, any word processor is fine. If you're doing like a linear story or like a cutscene type of thing, screenplay format is plenty effective for this sort of thing. It's great for talking about or working out dialogue as well. We had a workshop on that in the past. Notes are online and all that good stuff. You can also use spreadsheets, and these can be more useful in certain cases. At times, so what you can do is you can say list the character, the trigger, and the line of your dialogue, right? This is especially helpful if maybe there's a lot of possible interactions that you can do, or lots of lines of dialogue. Or if you have perhaps voiceover, it might also be good to keep track of. And some dialogue tools that your programmers make can actually use the information and read from files that are generated by spreadsheets. Usually these are going to be like your .csvs and .tsvs, which are comma-separated variables and tab-separated variables. I haven't worked too much with these, so I can't talk all that much, but I'm pretty sure if a programmer is using or making a tool, it'll be reading something like that. Or JSON, which we'll get to in just a second. So for more, I guess, independent projects, there are some other tools that you can use that maybe require a little bit less on like group active, like programmers and all that good stuff. So a really good one is Twine. It's really easy to learn. It's very light on programming. It has very good documentation online, meaning that you can find a lot of good tutorials on how to use it. It's really easy to share your work. It kind of outputs like a web page format, so you can make sort of node-based branching stories, and it'll export it into just a series of web pages, which is really good. It's also got a really nice graphical interface, so editing it is really easy. However, it does have several different formatting styles, so you only really need to learn one, but if you're trying to get help from, say, a person, maybe they know a different formatting style than you. So that's just something to keep in mind. One thing, though, it does not integrate with Unity at all. There is a tool called Cradle, which can be used to put Twine games in Unity, but it's not very flexible. So for the most part, we don't recommend using it, but in some cases it might work for you. But otherwise, Twine doesn't integrate with Unity very well, to my knowledge anyway. So moving on, another tool is Yarn. I haven't looked into this one too much myself, but I want to take a look because it looks really interesting. So as far as the tool itself, it's very similar to Twine. The programming takes a lot of cues from Twine, and it has a very similar graphical interface, which is really nice to work with, especially if you're doing branching storylines or different paths, right? It integrates very easily with Unity. It exports to JSON files, which is another type of memory storage file for these types of things. And so Unity can read JSON files really easily. And I'm pretty sure you can interact directly with Unity Game. You can create functions in your code, and this is all programmer stuff, so I'm not as familiar with it, but I believe programmers can make interactions in Yarn affect gameplay objects, right? So maybe like moving a square around based on variables from your Yarn game. I'm not entirely sure, but I know that there's really good integration with Unity here. That being said, Yarn's a little weird in that it has some weaker documentation, I feel. It seems like most of the sources for information on Yarn were through various GitHub pages, which is probably fine, but as a non-programmer, it was like, is this right? And as a result, it was also complicated to download and install. You need the graphical user interface that's your editor, right? And to download and install that, you needed some other supplementary program. And then I had to download another tool just to test it outside of Unity to make sure that everything was working fine. So that was a little weird, but once you have that all down, it seems like it's a good tool. And it seems like it's pretty flexible with Unity if you got some programmers. Just be sure to be talking between you and your programmer if you are using it. And another tool to use, one last one, is Inkle. This is probably the hardest one for non-programmers to learn. It's not a graphical interface. It reads kind of like just regular code. But it still kind of has some things in common with Twine and Yarn, so if you're coming from those ones, you should be able to pick it up. Once again, it integrates really easy with Unity if you export to JSON files, right? I'm pretty sure this one's leans much more heavily towards text-heavy games, like mostly text games. The documentation for this one was good. It was definitely better than Yarn's, but maybe not as good as Twine's, but still good. And this one's probably the easier to pick up if you're coming from a programming background because of its more technical programming and syntax. It can also handle branching storylines. It kind of technically works with nodes as well, but once again, it's not in a graphical interface. It's very linear, so it's kind of weird to work with. And yeah, whenever you're using any of these systems, just be sure to be communicating with your programmers if it's a group project. If it's Yarn, for example, make sure they know like what you need from them and whatnot. And in general, that's just really important. If you're working with a programmer who's making their own dialogues tool, be very clear what you need and what they can do to help you, making it easier to use. I've found that programmers that I've worked with that are making their own dialogue systems tend to talk in a lot of programmer jargon, which is good but harder to understand for me. And they definitely approach it from the perspective of a programmer, like, how can I program it more effectively? So make sure that your voice is heard as to what they can do for you in terms of a writer's perspective. But that being said, also try to consider things for them. Be cooperative with them. For example, they might need you to write in a certain format to better read the information. Try to follow along as best as you can. It's a team effort. Cooperate with them. Another thing, there was another point I wanted to make. It's eluding me right now, but I'll come back to that if I remember it. So with that, we're going to start an activity. So pull out a pen and paper or a computer, and we're going to be starting to write some sample dialogue here. So forgive this just having a lot of text on this page, but for this activity, I want you to write a few lines of dialogue that do all or most of the following. Instruct the player to do something, assuming this is in a gameplay context. So tells us about the character, the speaker, who they are, what they might be like, and do it in less than 15 words. You can do any sort of scenario, but here are some samples for you if you are so inclined to try that out. So yeah, it can be several lines of 15 words or less, but just don't have them monologuing forever, I guess. But try to keep it nice and short. So yeah, we're going to take some time to do that, and once you got a few lines, let's meet back up and talk about how that's gone. For any online viewers, though I haven't checked if there are any, feel free to tag along and do this activity yourself. It's all good practice. And once again, these sample scenarios are not necessary. You can use them for inspiration, but you don't have to. And yeah, while we're working, I think I'm going to mute the mic, and we'll come back and share some of our examples when we're done. All right. Okay, so we're back, and so it sounds like everybody's got some dialogue lines. So who wants to share their lines of dialogue?
I can show them.
Great. So you're gonna share a line of dialogue.
Yeah.
So what have you got?
Okay, so I have one for the orange guy, and then the old guy, and the friend.
Cool. Tell us, tell us what the context is, and then tell us the line.
Okay, so the prompt there is, he is a poet, cursed to only speak in rhymes. He needs the player to bring him an orange.
Okay.
For that I have, cursed I am, but I ask thee, bring me an orange from the giant tree.
That's lovely, and I like it a lot.
Great.
Let's see. So, yeah, nice. So that, like, really quickly, tells us he's cursed, just flat out. It's like, that's something we know. Okay. We don't know. Did it say what the curse is?
No.
No?
I mean, I was kind of limited by the 15
You sure
minutes,
were,
so-
and that's the fun part. That's okay. We know he's cursed, so we're like, well, what's he cursed with? Is he just a dude that's cursed but likes to rhyme? We don't know, but that's okay. Can you read it one more time? Because it was really quick.
Cursed I am, but I ask thee, bring me an orange from the giant tree.
Great, cool. So we've got a giant tree. That's a little bit of world building right there. It's like,
Yes.
where are we? There's a giant tree. Are we in the middle of an orange forest? Is it a magical orange forest? So it's got some fun stuff going for
It's a
it.
special tree.
It's a special tree, of course. Nice, nice. Do you want to share another? Anyone else want to throw out their lines?
Yeah, I mean, I can
Cool.
do if anybody else doesn't want to.
Sure.
Alright,
Yeah.
so the old mentor figure that gives the player a new technique. It's time to tell them how to use it.
Great.
That's not 15 words.
Well, I mean, that's the
That's the
prompt.
prompt.
This trick here has saved my life more than once. Press triangle when your sword glows.
Yes. I'm quite partial to
Pressing triangle?
blatant world, or like breaking the fourth wall there with
Well, I mean,
instructions.
how else would you?
Yeah, pretty much. And then it's like, what do you mean press triangle? It's like,
just
you'll
you'll figure.
figure it out. Yeah. And
I love pressing triangle.
Spyro does that a lot.
Yeah.
Every dragon tells Spyro what buttons to press on
Yep.
the controller.
Let's see. So your line, it's like, this trick saved me many times in the past. That's
Yeah.
that's fun. That tells us about the character. It's like, oh, he's been in a scuffle where his sword has glown and he's had to use a special attack, I guess.
Yes.
Which is always fun. I like that. Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Someone else want to share their line?
I got one.
Cool.
On the same prompt.
Great.
Use the technique, grasshopper. Jam the sword into your rectum.
Hey, wait.
And spin.
Okay, well, that was a little bit more mature than I would have liked. I'm not going to ask you to repeat that, but that was a very special technique. I don't... Oh, boy.
It's a super secret
Yeah.
bloodline technique that
Okay.
we can use.
Um,
We're gonna get banned from Twitch.
Yeah, that sure was a thing. Okay, well, gonna have to put a warning on that one. Oof. Okay. I was a little bit thrown off guard by that one, so I'm not sure what to say.
This stream is intended for mature audiences only.
Apparently. Well.
This stream was from mature audience.
Yeah. Do you have another one?
No.
Okay.
I was not sure that one.
Just that one? Okay. Well, it certainly has character to it. That I would say would fit. I feel like you need some preparation for like the tone and atmosphere and the
Oh,
type
yeah,
of game. Like
for sure.
if we went into the game knowing like it's gonna have some
Stand up feeling these voice acting.
stuff like that, it'd probably fly pretty well. But that was just a big surprise here. Okay, hey. Okay, we're yep. Okay. Would anyone else like to share their lines? Did you make one? No? Oh, okay, that's fine. Did you want to share any of your lines?
I mean, how am I supposed to one up that?
With great effort.
Yeah, with an actual good one.
Come a little closer so the mic can pick you up. I mean, it can probably pick you up, but... Alright, what you've got?
Here's one for the Russian dating sim.
Oh, okay, well, that wasn't on the list, but we'll take it. So this is for a dating sim. No, it doesn't have to be on the list. So this is for a dating sim?
It was for the Riley dating sim we discussed. While
Yes, a dating sim.
I'm Rad Riley. Give me my skateboard so we can go on a date.
Okay, so we have I'm Rad Riley, so this is the first time they're meeting, I guess? Fair, okay. Give me my skateboard.
Unless you always announce your name. every time you meet.
Yeah, unless he announces his name every time he meets them. That'd be an interesting character trait, which would be a kind of fun thing to have. give me my skateboard is the instruction, and he's such a cool guy, he's got a skateboard, I guess, and so we can go on a date. So it does lead the story forward. We're gonna go on a fetch quest for the skateboard to progress the story to get on this date.
Exactly.
Nice. Okay, that's an interesting one. Cool, cool. Did you have another one you want to share, or not? Okay.
The other one's kind of
Cool. So yeah, great work today, guys. I think that's all that we have for today, really. Like any other sort of writing skill, this only gets better with practice. So feel free to practice this as much as you can, as much as you want to. It doesn't have to be this type of activity or prompt. Just sort of go out there and write and do stuff and be great. And thank you so much for coming today for this workshop. I don't think I'll be holding a workshop next week because, finals are coming up. But I wish you all the best of luck on your finals, on your projects, and all your work. So yeah, thanks for coming, and I'll see you guys